means to our family, and so I've kind of spread out. They've let me spread out a few things that I've gathered over time, either from my family or because seminars and things that I've done. So, one of the questions I get asked is people see all the stuff in my house, and why do you have all this? What you got to haul all that stuff around, and there's boxes and stacks, and I say, well, it's for my family. It's something that's important to me. And so, to give an example of how I've used that, about a year ago, as we know, the COVID came out, and our family. So I have 3 married children, and it's interesting how they all react differently to the stresses of the lockdowns and the quarantines and what's going to happen, not knowing what's going to happen. And I remember as a father in my home and being worried about my married kids and then my grandkids. I remember hearing this a lot in the news. Maybe you did too. They said, "This is unprecedented. This virus is unprecedented." It was one of their favorite remarks. Unprecedented, like it's never happened before. And I started being kind of a student of history. I started thinking back on some of the history that I'm aware of, and our families have had to go through. And I thought of Wilmar and his wife, Edwina. This is them right here. And I remembered, because I had done some scanning recently with the SHOTBOX of their letters. And I remembered that they were engaged in 1918. And as a student of history, I know that was in the 3 years of World War I had been going on. The pandemic was just about to start. Now, this pandemic was way different than the one we have now, in that they estimate that something on the order of, 20, 30, 40 million people died worldwide. So this was a very deadly pandemic. And so this was right before that started. And then there would be, of course, there'd be the Roaring '20s after that, and then there'd be the Great Depression, and then there'd be World War II. So I kind of took umbrage at this. I didn't want to hear any more that this was unprecedented. And I had young married kids that were very worried. And so I went back and I found a letter of my grandfather to my grandmother when they were engaged. And he said this, and I don't know if you can see that, but to my children, I took the scanned version of that and I cropped it so that they could actually see it in his handwriting. Because I thought, it's one thing to type it up, right? It's one thing to say, yeah, this is what he said. But here it is in his handwriting. And so here's what he said. They're engaged. He says, quote, "Dad once told me that to be a dreamer wasn't a bad trait, but to let them remain so was. Let those dreams remain so was. So now all I have to do is make them come true. This war is just a handicap thrown in to make it harder." That war was the Great War, if you will, World War I. "But we'll fool them and start a family of our own and show them what a real good pair we can be." And then I put their pictures, at the bottom. So that's, as you can see, that's actually this little piece right here, shot right there in my SHOTBOX, and that's the father. So I sent that around along with this letter, and the letter I said to my kids was, I said to my wonderful and amazing family, "The events of the last few weeks and months have been tumultuous. Some of the popular pundits have said the advent of this worldwide pandemic of the coronavirus has led to unprecedented events. Actually, the truth is, these events are far from unprecedented." And then I went on to talk about what this family, this young couple, had to deal with over the course of their married life. Not to minimize the challenges we're facing now, but to say to them, you have a heritage, you have a tradition of family members who have had to overcome these things. And indeed they did. They ended up getting married in 1920, October of 1920. And then they stayed married their whole lives. And they had one child, my mom. And I'm the only living child that she has. She had a sister. I had a sister as well. But he did do what he said he would do. He said, here's what I said to my kids. He said, "This war is just a handicap thrown in to make it harder, but we'll fool them and start a family of our own, and we'll show them." So I said to my kids, I said, we can fool them and we can show them when people say this is unprecedented. And the way we'll do that is we'll do it together. So I guess the reason I say that to you is that as you're doing this work and you're bringing these stories together, I'm convinced that the reason for that is that you want to share it. You want them to be able to know it. Not long ago, I have a child who travels a lot. One of my married kids, Christopher, travels a lot. And when he was telling me all the places that he was going to go, I recognized that some of those places one of my ancestors went as well. His name was, what was his name again? William C. Pierce. I was having a brain cramp. He traveled all over the world. There's his initials. And I remember going through this and shooting pictures of the various places that William C. Pierce had gone in Europe. And then my son said, oh, by the way, we're going to Europe and we're going to tour some cities. And so I went back in my archive and I found pictures of my great-grandfather by the Eiffel Tower, and my great-grandfather in Rome, and my great-grandfather in Egypt by the pyramids. All places that Chris and his family would go. And for fun, I went ahead and texted it to them on their cell phones. Would you believe that I got so many texts back from them? Who was this again? Why was he here? What was going on? We're going to go stand in that same place, and we're going to get our picture taken right there where he got his picture taken. To me, that's what this is about. It's about having our families connect and to feel like they're a part of that, and to be curious, right? And try to understand, to kind of look back. And in so doing, I think they do begin to forget some of the tumultuous times that are around us. Now, one thing that you're probably familiar with is that antiquities, if you will, things that we love, things that are family heirlooms, have a tendency to spread out, if you know what I mean. This is a picture of Edwin G. Frazier. He had a coal and lime business in Rock Island, Illinois, and we had that on our mantle for a long time. I mentioned him yesterday. Later, I found that he also had this wonderful whiskey flask. and I mentioned yesterday that our family, we're sort of we don't have a tradition of alcohol. We try to keep away from that stuff. But over time, as you can imagine, in the event that I pass away, there will be my children who will say, do you want to see that closer up? Mm-hmm. My children who will say, there's some things of dads I want, or there's some things of moms I want, right? So which of these two things do you think that I've had the most requests for? That's right. It's this whiskey flask. In fact, I haven't had anybody ask for Edwin's picture, and yet these two go together, and they're supposed to be together. These books right here actually are my grandfather, Wilmar Pierce. They're his United States Navy Annapolis textbooks. Look how small they are. Kind of cool. That's one. This one here says the Ship and Gun Drills of the U.S. Navy, 1914, right? And then this one here says Landing Force Manual, United States Navy, 1918. Now these just sat. There's kind of a cool picture on the back of a uniformed Navy guy there. And inside there are notes from my grandfather. There's his actual signature, Wilmar Pierce. And so these sit on a shelf, and they sat on a shelf for a long time. Then later, I mentioned yesterday that I found this insignia of his. And then later, I actually found this picture. If you look there, this insignia is actually right on the picture there, on his collar. So what's my point here? Well, when I pass on, the chances of these things all staying together, right, to actually being together and not divvied up are pretty small. So here I've taken a picture of all of them inside the SHOTBOX. I have this image of Wilmar. I have the 3 books. And then I have this insignia. And the reason for that is I've digitized that. It's in our family archives. And even in the event that I pass on and they get split up and go different places, at least we have a record that they belong together, right? That it's a part of our family heirlooms. I mentioned yesterday this image of my mother. I had this snow globe. I didn't bring it. It's very fragile. But I had this snow globe for a while, and it was old and cool looking. And I figured my mom probably knew about it. But later when I was doing scanning, I found that this picture of her actually holding the snow globe. And so once again, I used my SHOTBOX to capture that and to digitize that so people can see that, that they go together. So at the end of the day, the SHOTBOX has proven to be a very easy way for me to help do that. So behind me, I've got a number of artifacts. Sometimes when I go places, you can imagine going to your Aunt Betty's house and you see something like this on the fireplace or in a window. And the idea of taking that out of her home is probably not very good because she's not going to want you to take it, right? And so, in fact, taking it out of the frame is a little dangerous. If you've ever taken out old pictures, you know that they sometimes can fall apart or be damaged. And so I was able to take this, look, even on the back there's a string to hold the thing together. You know, it's really quite old. And I can see there's another picture in behind here. I actually did take it apart at one point to see that. So to be honest, I don't even know who these people are yet. I just know that they're somebody important in my distant family. So this picture here, maybe I'll pull it off so you can see it, because I've got a Velcro. So using the SHOTBOX and a green backdrop, I was able to put the whole thing, take a shot of the whole thing. And the idea is, I never had to take it apart, because number one, the people who own it don't want you to take it apart, and then I don't want to take it apart because I'm worried that there'll be some damage. This is a little book that I've had again in my family for a long time. I didn't bring it today. It's just a cute book, small. It's about 4 inches by 6 inches, and guess what it says? Advice to a married couple. And I said, well, I might want to read that one day, finally, after being married. I've been married now 40 years, a tribute to my wife, by the way. And so I read that. And here's a tip, by the way. You might have old books in your house that have been in your family for generations. I hope that you've gone through every page at least once. Not that you even have to read every page, but you go through every page to see if there's anything in there that you might be surprised about. I did that with this finally. I went through it, and at the very end of this book, there was a piece of paper folded up. I thought, that's interesting. So I unfolded it, and a small little piece of paper, and here it is. I'm going to pull it off so you can shoot it. In the very back of that book, it says, this certifies that Mr. Benjamin C. Coleman and Mrs. Mary Lena Bulb were united in marriage according to the laws of the land in New York at Monroe, the 24th day of November, A.D. 1858. And that was in the back of that little book and had been for generations, and we did not even know that it was there. And so, again, I could take this certificate out, which is typically what you do, right? Well, this is a certificate. I need to save it, right? And put it where the certificates go. But I wanted to keep it with the book, and so it's actually still in the book. And I've digitally captured it so that we see that they actually go together. And so those kind of things make it fun and enjoyable. And let me see what else this was a cool little birth announcement. Chicago, 937 Jackson Boulevard. Wilmar Trimble Pierce was born May the 25th, 1895 at 1240. And that hand my family jokes around about because it looks like a little wolf hand, like maybe he's Wolfman Jack or something. Now, here's the original. So I actually shot that in SHOTBOX inside the plastic so that it wouldn't be damaged. And the truth is that when I die, this may go to one of my 3 kids. And then when they die, it might go to one of their 7 kids or whatever it is. And so this dispersion makes it very difficult for families to feel close, to the loved ones in the bygone day. So anyway, what else do I want to talk about here? Let me know if you have any questions. So one of the things that we have is this album, and it's been in our family for, again, about 100, well, almost basically 200 years now. No, 120 years. There's not 200 years. As you can see, it is falling apart. And again, people will say, well, why do you take it out? Well, I want. First of all, I'm excited about showing how beautiful it is, and the beautiful clasp there. But the challenge is that it's slowly deteriorating. And once again, you can imagine I have 3 married kids, and 2 daughters have said they want this. So who's gonna get it, right? And of course, when you die, you don't want somebody to argue over, I want that and I want that. So instead. And I haven't decided we'll actually get it. We're hoping to keep all of this in a family archive that one of the family siblings will be taking care of. But as you can see from these pictures right here, with the SHOTBOX, I was able to digitally capture every single one of those images. And now on the internet, they go in the cloud, they go to Kindex, I use Kindex, or they go to some of the other Google Photo archives, they can actually see every single one of these images. And that way, I'm actually doing 2 things if you think about it. I'm trying to make it where these things don't get dispersed, but in the event that there's a loss because of fire or damage, earthquake, flood, or whatever, that I have a backup to it. And I could actually reproduce, that very image, and so that very album. So enjoyed that quite a bit. This belonged to one of my ancestors. Where's her picture? Right here. Her name was Mary Elizabeth Fraser. And when we digitally captured this, we went ahead and captured the back also. So I'm going to turn it over here. And on the back it says the photographer was in Davenport, Iowa. And that's a real clue if you're trying to do family history and you're trying to see when this picture was taken and you don't have a date. You can kind of see, well, I know when they were in Davenport, so that gives me an idea of what year that was. This has been in our family from her for a long time, and I'll hold it up there. It is made out of leather, and so it's kind of deteriorating. I'm going to show you the backside. You're just kind of coming off on you because it's falling apart. But these are her writings. On this page, she says, Oscar, one of her sons, graduated from high school in 1904, graduated at Illinois College at 1908, and from Harvard Law in 1911. So kind of a wonderful thing to have for your family history. Now, once again, this will be something that one of the kids will say, well, I want this, and by digitizing it as I have right here, then I can make sure everybody has access to it, and at the same time, make sure that it is preserved, I probably need to hold it up over there too, huh? So, something like that. That's very cool. So, I mentioned yesterday that I have my grandchildren help me with this, and I really do. They enjoy getting out the pictures, and they enjoy helping me do the scanning. But the more important thing is that they begin to tell those stories, and so this gives us an opportunity to do just that. So, not sure what questions you might have or where we should go from here, but that's kind of where I'm at and what I had in mind.
Greg, why do you go through the work to put everything on the board and group all these things together?
Well, when I did this for seminars that I've had, because I've done seminars to kind of show how to use SHOTBOX and how to have fun doing it. There are times when people want to do stuff like this, but they get overwhelmed, right? And to the extent that we get overwhelmed, then we kind of quit. And so I wanted to show that it could be easy to do and it could be fun, right? And so I kind of took a reporter approach. I kind of said, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to kind of act like I'm Sherlock Holmes. And so I just use some of the programs that are out there. I capture these things in SHOTBOX, and then I use Canva, which is like a Photoshop program, but easy to use. It's a subscription service online. I use PicMonkey, which is another program that helps you to clear it up and helps you show you could take, for example, a daguerreotype that is very light and faint, and with SHOTBOX I capture the image, and then with PicMonkey I can make that image pop out so that I can actually see who it is. And so at the end of the day, I also want it for my children, so we get together as a family and I point out who these people are and why it's important that we, why they're fun and that they're real. So.
And I love how you group pictures and objects together to associate them. That probably has a lot of value and meaning to you, not only you, but your family as you share those things.
Without it, as I mentioned before, these things run the risk of being orphans. I just helped a friend move this morning. They were clearing out their attic. Boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff. And guess what happens when things are not labeled and we don't have this kind of a record? There is a real propensity to throw it away, right? There's a coin fell out of one of the boxes, and it was from 1941. It was a 1941 nickel. Gives you an idea of how long that might have been in there, right? But the propensity is throw it away, get rid of it, right? I don't want to organize anymore. And so whenever you see an old thing and you say, wow, that's made it through many different moves, right? And as I said before, that there's some things in my house I just gather because I like to go to garage sales and I like old things myself, and antiquities are fascinating to me, cultural things. But there's other things that have been in our family for many, many years. So I did capture this and the whiskey flask because I wanted to make sure that they knew that belonged to Edwin G. Fraser, right? And on my wall at home, there's a big picture of his business, which is the coal and lime business in Rock Island, Illinois. And so And you know, not to be too redundant, but I often get a lot of people who kind of feel like, so what? They're not going to care, right? They don't care. And I'm finding that's not true. I'm finding that as they start to go through the past lives of their ancestors and they start saying, wow, there's my grandfather and he had a coal and lime business. This is kind of fascinating. I found this book in the things that belong to my family. And at first I didn't realize why it was there. It just says Rock Island Illustrated. Now this was back when I was young. I was in my 30s at the time. And fortunately I decided to save it and not get rid of it, right? But I didn't quite really know what it was for. And so years later I began to realize that my grandfather had a business there in Rock Island, Illinois. And I thought, I wonder maybe there's something about it. And sure enough, you open up and here it is, E.G. Frazier's coal and lime business right there in Rock Island, Illinois, and a little blurb, you know, about them. Now this is kind of a story about not throwing things away that you don't understand or why you have it. So when I first saw this, I was in my 30s. It was in an old box that I had. And I thought, I don't know what that's for. And yeah, they lived in Rock Island, but I don't know. I kind of thumbed through it. Okay, that's fascinating, you know. But I thought to myself, well, it's been passed down from generation to generation for 100 years. You know, maybe I should save it. And it wasn't until later that I found out that he had his own business there. And I thought, oh, that was in Rock Island. And so I was able to use, again, I used a SHOTBOX, but with SHOTBOX I went ahead and captured the front. As you can kind of see, it's falling apart. And then yesterday I showed you the picture that I do have of him in front of that business, which is kind of cool. But then on the inside, I went ahead and shot the inside leaf of that book I just showed you, again using SHOTBOX. And then I went to the page and captured that page, again digitizing that. So now those of you who have done research, you might find this fascinating. I go to a research library, and I was in Rock Island. I was able to get a big map because I knew that he had his business there, and I got a map from 1900. They were selling us, you know, kind of a collector's item of what the city looked like, and that was kind of cool. But while I was there were some books on the shelves. Now, you know what happens is if you want something out of that book, you can jot it down, or you can go take them over to the copy center, and you can stand in line, and they'll take copies, and they'll be in a hurry, and you'll be paying $1 a copy or something like that. But I found that every one I've gone to probably half a dozen libraries where I say, can I use my SHOTBOX? They go, sure, that's fine. So I set up my SHOTBOX there on the desk. I get out the book, right to the page. I carefully put it in there, and I'm taking pictures of these very important articles. And in that sense, I'm not having to go make copies. So it's very practical, and it's a lot faster, you know, as well. So they turn out well. Most of these, what I do is I take the digital copy, and then I use, PicMonkey or Canva or one of the other programs to help clean it up and have it, you know, look more beautiful and be able to pass it on. It also enables me to put little things with it. So by putting it in one of those programs, I can kind of put some verbiage in there explaining, you know, what it is, and I save that. Now, along about now, someone will say, well, so what do you do with all these files? Well, my objective is that my first goal is to scan everything. I want to scan everything. And the reason is because it's all slowly dying, right? So this is that book, and you can kind of see, you see the pages are coming apart, and a little bit just fell on the floor there. So it's the slow process of burning. And so I realize that I have a limited amount of time to capture these images. Now, again, someone will say, well, what are you going to do with it? Well, right now I'm just saving them on a hard drive next to my computer and then also in the cloud. But at the end of the day, sometimes people, because they're afraid of what to do with all this, they don't do anything, right? They kind of say, I'm not a computer person, and so I might as well not even try. And so my counsel to you is that your grandkids are probably smarter than you about your computer, and I promise you they know exactly what to do with that stuff, and they'll enjoy doing it. And so I'm not kidding when I say I have hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of scans, and they are not indexed. You can't search them. I just have them. I actually start off by just saying today is February the 25th, 2021, and these are the scans I'm doing today. And then I scan them with my SHOTBOX and get them in the system and then copy them to the hard drive. Then as I get down the line, maybe 15, 20 years from now, it might be that long before some of my kids start going through, well, let's start tagging these, let's start organizing these, you know. And what do you think would cause them to do that? Well, Dad just died. What are we going to do with this? All the stuff he gave us, right? Or maybe there's been something tragic happen. There's been a fire in the coat closet, and we've lost a lot of that stuff. And there's a lot of tears, right? And there's been a flood. And the photograph albums are all ruined. It wouldn't take much to ruin these. You can kind of see they're quite old now, you know. And so anytime you hear of a flood or a fire or a hurricane or something, you know this is what's lost. So you can imagine that situation, them saying, wait a minute, Dad did all these scans. Maybe he scanned it. Let's go look, you know, even if I'm not around anymore. And, you know, and then they start looking, well, there it is. There's page 1. On all of these albums, for example, because I don't want to handle them too much, I shoot one side. So I shoot that page, then I skip the back, right? Shoot the next page, then I turn the whole thing over in the SHOTBOX and I do the back side. And I shoot the whole thing. So I go, wow, it's 100 pages long. Here are the odd shots, here are the even shots, and I've got them all, right? They might be motivated at that point, you know, to do that. I have to divide it up and say I can't do everything, but here's what I can do. So my advice is do what you can do. I can scan. I can scan pretty quick. I'm pretty good at it. I've gotten good. I wasn't at first. But because of the cell phone, I can scan fast. I've learned how to scan things that are even in plastic because of the glare shields that come with SHOTBOX. They're awesome. So I don't want to take this, you know, birth certificate out of its plastic container, acid-free plastic container. I want it to be damaged. And so I left it in there, and using the glare shields, I was able to capture that beautifully. So that's something that I can do. My daughter Jennifer, my daughter-in-law Leslie, can type fast. So in the program I've used, which is Kindex, they pulled up letters from the 1800s. And they've told me when they called, said, did you know? And then they start telling me all this story. You know, did you know that she came down the Ohio River on a flat boat with 3 children, and she was a widow, and she ended up in Rock Island, and she had to start a new life there because her husband didn't leave her with anything, and that she was only 4'11" and weighed about 90 pounds, and she was able to survive that? And when your children say stuff like that, you're like, awesome. You know, that's awesome, because as I maintain, my job is not just to save it and to secure it, but also to get them to buy it. And so my answer to people say, well, I don't know what to do. I'm not a computer guru, and I don't have the money to buy a computer. I don't have the money to buy a scanner. I don't have a lot of money to pay someone all this. Then I just say, well, what do you have? What are you good at? What can you do? And so I encourage them, go find it. You're the Sherlock Holmes. I'm telling you that in every home you'll find this stuff. It's there. This is a small sampling of what we've gathered, and a lot of this stuff, like the 2 kids kissing, I don't know who those people are. They're my family. I know that. And I'm thinking one day I'll figure out who they are. But right now I don't. So you do what you can do, and I think that's crucial. So did I answer your question, Matt?
You sure did. Thank you very much.
So, and I don't know what other questions you might have. I'm reaching the end of my just talk mode. So, I do hope that you just look at this and say, I'm just going to start. I'm going to start doing what I can do today. Make it easy.
Greg, one question did pop in my mind, and maybe it's more of a comment, but as you've talked, one of the things that keeps coming to my heart, my remembrance, is that statement of what have you done with my name?
Yes.
And that question comes from a lot of perspectives, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Where it comes from out of our history
Mm-hmm.
and our ancestors, and also goes to the present, and it goes to our posterity.
Yes.
And that's what a lot of this is about, as I hear you talk about what you've preserved and the legacy that you're trying to pass on to your children.
Mm-hmm.
It's that question of what have we done with our name?
Mm-hmm.
And what are we passing on?
Yeah.
And what do we learn and gain from those things?
Yeah.
And your stories are illustrating that to me, and it's the value that all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
all of this history has provided, these experiences and what they provide as examples of strength and faith,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe tragedy,
Mm-hmm.
that we can learn from and carry forward.
Yeah.
And so I really
So it all
appreciate
starts.
your
Thank you. It all starts with that. I have a 12-year. At the time she was 12-year-old granddaughter, and her name is Adeline, and Adeline's mom, my daughter, called and said, Adeline needs to do a report on a woman from history in our family. And I'm thinking you might be able to find some information on a woman in our family. I said, yeah, I think I can do that. And so I go through our archive and I type in Edwina G. Fraser, or I type in, you know, one of the other ladies in our family, and pull up information, and it's very easy to do because it's already been, you know, digitized and easy to find. The surprising thing for me and others is that young people are interested in this, and so maybe the first step is to say, I'm just going to do what I can do, and I know how to use a cell phone, and I can use a SHOTBOX, and it's pretty simple to do. If you don't have a SHOTBOX and you can't get a shot, I'd say do something. Start taking pictures. I think SHOTBOX are affordable, and it's been simple to use and easy for me to use. But get started. Get started. You'll find it fascinating. As I mentioned early in this broadcast, I had kids who were traveling in Europe, and then they were also traveling in Asia, and I sent them pictures of their grandfather in some of those places, and I didn't think anything would come of it. And they texted the grandchildren texted back and said, I saw that, and we stood right there where they were. That tells me that there's something that draws our family, you know, to that. And again, like I said yesterday, it makes you feel better at the end of the day that you're making progress, you know. So I will make one other point here. We always think that these stories are for the old items we have, right? And on a shelf in my office, there is a lump of money. It's 3 or 4 quarters, a dime, a nickel, and maybe a penny or two, and it's melted together. And it sits there, and I assumed that all my kids knew what that was. When I was a child, I was burned in a terrible accident. I was in a fire, and I spent 6 months in the hospital, 3.5 months direct, and going back. It was a real tragedy. It was a lot of growing and a very difficult thing for our family. And I keep that lump of money sitting on a shelf there, a prominent shelf, to remind me that I've been through hard things and that I can do hard things again, right? And our family can. And my son, one of my married sons, I heard him speak about this event. He said, my dad was in a fire once, and it was so hot that the money in his pocket melted together. And I was like, oh no, that's not what happened. He said, melt money together, it has to be like 1,500 to 2,000 degrees, right? And they go, oh no, that's not what happened. What happened was, after the fire was all over, my family went back to the site and dug through the burned ashes and the remnants of the truck and the camper, and then they found this lump of money. And so I said right then, okay, I have got to write this story down. I've got to take pictures of the money, and then I've got to tell my story, because if I don't, then they're going to come up with these, unusual stories. So once again, I've digitally captured it, different things, and my wife is using the cell phone and asking me to tell the story. And the reason is because I could never type it up. I was like, oh, I don't know how to say it, I don't write it. And she knew I like telling stories. That's what I like to do. So she knows I like to do it in the car. So I'm driving, she turns on the phone, tell me about this. And so then she's recording me, and I'm telling the story. Well, what does that have to do about this? Well, I'm wanting to preserve the things that I have that are in my life right now, as opposed to the things that are 150 years ago. Because guess what? I'm thinking that lump of money is going to be around in another 100 years, maybe, and they're going to say, why do we have this thing? Can you imagine? What do we got this whole melted money for? That's kind of weird. But if there's a story to, oh, our great-great-grandfather was in a fire, nearly died, and that he saved that to remember that Strauss can do hard things. And so I just think that there's a lot more there than just the old stuff, in the past. So anyway, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.